Hey there, welcome back. Alright, so in this module we're going to talk about the second step of 5S, which is straighten. Specifically, by the end of this module, you'll know what straighten really means and why it's so important. And you'll also know the 3 steps to straightening up any process, no matter what type of business or industry you work in. And for the record, these 5S principles, what we're talking about in this course, most definitely transfer to your personal and home lives. So, let's start things off by learning what straightening really means. Formally defined, straightening means to arrange all necessary items in such a way as to maximize economy of movement. In other words, we should place the things we use most close to us in a clearly labeled and designated place. Now, you might be wondering what the image of a gunfighter has to do with straightening, but if you think about it, how effective would a gunfighter be if his tools, namely his pistols, weren't organized in such a way as to maximize economy of movement? Well, really, all we're doing in a straighten step is asking the question, what's the right place for the items we use most? Now, with this said, straighten doesn't simply mean to put things in neat rows, as the name might imply. Instead, it means to find a place for everything while ensuring everything is in its place, which is why some actually refer to the step as set in order. Okay, well, let's switch gears now and discuss why straightening is so important. First of all, once items have been organized and straightened, they're easy to find and return. As an example, if you mistakenly grab some red apples instead of green apples in this store, it wouldn't take you long to remedy the situation, since this particular supermarket excels at the straighten step of 5S. Next, straightening also makes things much easier to find, which in turn eliminates the frustration caused when we're searching for things. And in fact, most people don't initially think about is that straightening also reduces inventory, since things don't get lost and you don't buy extra items you already own. As just one example, we find that many companies spend thousands of dollars on office supplies each year when, in many cases, if each and every employee straighten their desk and office supplies, they may realize there's no need to buy another pencil or pen for 2 years, thus radically reducing office expenses and cost. Of course, this also applies to expensive tools used by machinists or medical instruments used by nurses and doctors. Now, these are just a few of the examples of why straightening is so important. There are many more reasons, such as the fact that the straighten step is actually at the core of so many important lean and business principles, such as safety, ergonomics, quality, inventory control, productivity, standard work, the visual workplace, and employee morale. All right, well, now that we've established the importance of straightening, let's learn the 3 steps we need to follow in order to make it happen. First, once we're done sorting and getting rid of the things we no longer need, we then need to understand the current situation. In other words, we need to understand what's needed in the way of tools and supplies at the place the work is done. We also need to understand the standard work, or the things the person doing the job does on a regular basis. Next, we must decide where things belong based on our understanding of the work that's done. And finally, once we know where to put things, we must determine how things should be stored, since making them easy to find doesn't always mean they're easy to retrieve. Okay, so let's spend a little time discussing the first step, which is to understand the current situation. Now, our movement into straighten, or 2S, must begin by analyzing how people get things and put them away, where they get them from, and why it takes as long as it does. While it may be routinely obvious, this study must be done at the Gemba, or the place the work is done. In other words, don't try to draw sketches of a shop layout from memory. It doesn't work. Also, be sure to study new operators along with veterans, since often old habits die hard. Once in Gemba, one of the things we must study is the distance the workers must travel to tools and supplies. Again, these supplies can be machine shop tools or the printer 32 employees have to walk to each and every day. Another important variable to study is the frequency at which tools and supplies are used. This is very important since we want the tools and supplies we use most close to us while moving things we don't use very often to another area, which further declutters the work area. Finally, the time required to get and put away items is very important. In other words, do we need forklifts? Do we need to unlock cabinets or obtain special handling devices? Do we need to ask for help or have to stand and painstakingly count out the items we need to do our jobs? Now, while the time values for any one get and put away may seem insignificant, the frequency and cumulative effect of all these activities will definitely impact the productivity of the work center. Okay, well, once we have a good understanding of the current situation, the second step is to decide where these things belong. Ultimately, this step is all about ensuring there's a place for everything and everything's in its place. We basically need to ask, where should that item go? In other words, what's the most natural place for each item that creates the smoothest flow possible? It's really important to look beyond the current placement of things in the workplace while imagining a better arrangement of machines, tools, fixtures, benches, tables, carts, supplies, trash cans, and really anything else in and around the place the work is done. It's also absolutely critical to label and make things very easy to locate, as demonstrated in these pictures. Additionally, during this phase, it's important to clearly identify boundaries. Well, many companies actually paint lines onto the floor in order to mark off where things should be located. And in some cases, tape, which is obviously easier to remove than paint, is also used to determine where things should be located. Alright, the next topic I'd like to explore with you is something called point of use, which basically describes when materials, tools, and parts are located close to the process they'll be used. When items are placed at point of use, they're immediately available within arm's reach. This makes things safer and more efficient since wasted motion, waiting, and correction is all but eliminated. Now, at this point, I'd like to ask you to take some time to study this picture to see how many point of use items you can spot. And see if you can envision how you would make things even better at this particular machine. So, feel free to pause the video at this point in order to have a good look. Now, once we've decided where things should be, the final step is to decide how things should be stored, since, as I mentioned earlier, just because things are easy to locate doesn't mean they're easy to retrieve. For example, if you had 30 seconds to find the item you needed, which storage method would you prefer? Obviously, the example on the right that utilizes some simple racking to get things off the floor is best, but these pictures are perfect examples of why the way things are stored makes a huge difference, at least in this example, and how easy it is to find and retrieve items. Another excellent method of storing items is to use shadow boards. Aside from being able to quickly retrieve items, shadow boards also make it easy to identify when tools or instruments are missing. Another method, and one that could actually be added to this shadow board, is to draw or paint the outline of each tool onto the wall, making it even more visible. Along these lines, here's another example of another way to store tools using foam cut out to the shape of the tool. This way, it's very obvious when something is missing, as well as where to put things back. Another excellent storage technique is to take full advantage of gravity. In this example, we see a simple but extremely effective technique to store and retrieve heavy cardboard. Also, you might have noticed that this entire unit is on wheels, making it very easy to move around as needed. In some ultra-lean companies, nearly everything, including trash cans, are on wheels. As we mentioned in the free 10 Commandments of Continuous Improvement module, our goal should always be to use creativity over capital, as demonstrated here. Now here's an excellent example of 5S at its best. Notice all the areas are taped off and that workstations have been fabricated to fit the worker. Also, notice that materials presented at point of use for the person seated at their workstation. Finally, the last thing I'd like to share in this module is something called the 3F standards. Namely, that proper storage consists of three things to start with F: fixed location, fixed items, and fixed quantity. As we can see in this example, the location, items stored, and quantity stored have all been fixed. Now then, as you've probably noticed, our bookshelf is beginning to look a little more organized. So far, we've red tagged the items and moved the items not needed out of the area. And most recently, I spent some time straightening. Specifically, I've organized my books according to usage, with the most frequently used books at eye level, and the less used books above and below them. I've also organized them in alphabetical order by book title, since I don't always have the authors memorized, but I do know the names of the books. Now in this situation, I actually took care of the third S, which is sweep or shine, since all the books were off the shelf, which made cleaning the crumbs and old Coke spills easy to do. And I was also able to do a few other things related to the third step during this cleaning process, but I'll save that explanation for the next module. So we'll speak to you soon.